Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ken Bone Zone. It is episode number 38. That is a milestone episode 38 because it is the second one in August, and August is month number 8, and 8 is a month multiple of 2. And you know what? It's hard to come up with milestone jokes, people. Send them in to me if you want to maybe keep doing it.
38's a hard one.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Next week's easy because it's another prime number. So, spoiler alert, next week's a milestone episode because it's 39. It's a prime number. Tonight we're going to be talking about all kinds of issues. We might get deep into a couple. Ooh, it gets philosophical on a couple issues. We're going to talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, just like every other podcast in the world, but we're not going to worship her as the new face of politics in America. Neither are we going to dump on her and call her an idiot because she's not either of those things. We're just going to talk about some of her ideas and some of her appearances since she's become such a big figure. We're talking about a study that came out about discrimination against trans people in dating, and that'll give us a chance to talk about what is and what is not discrimination. Then, of course, we're going to talk about the Oscars. We're going to talk about Hamas, talk about the Space Force, all that and a whole bunch more. Space Force! It's going to be a magical episode. How are you doing this week, buddy? My great friend Josh Burkett here co-hosting with me, as always.
I'm good. Other than the AC acting up, I'm good.
Oh yeah, Josh lives in the Great North, but even there, thanks to Al Gore and his invention of global warming, the air conditioning is a strict requirement, and it's not working. I don't know what I'd do here in St. Louis. My AC quit working. I'll probably find out in the next couple of summers because either my wife or my son insists on constantly leaving windows open with the air conditioning on or something insane. So we'll get to find out.
But Al Gore did invent the internet, and without the internet, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. So
that's true.
It all comes out in the wash.
He invented the internet, and then he invented global warming, and soon he will become the first emperor of the moon.
Wait, really?
Futurama reference.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Missed it.
Let's see. The first thing I got on the notes here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, those of you who don't know who she is, good for you, unless you live in Brooklyn or the Bronx, in which case you should know who she is. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she beat Joe Crowley, who is the number 4 Democrat in the House, in the Democratic primary, and so she's going to be the Democratic candidate for New York District number 14 for Congress, here in the election coming up in November. And she is a self-described Democratic socialist, which puts her firmly in the Bernie Sanders wing of politics. And she has been on a lot of national media lately because she pulled off this huge upset against Crowley, which was a big deal. He's a very powerful guy in the House of Representatives, and this unknown 28-year-old woman ran an excellent ground campaign and beat him in the primary, which, good for her. And so now she's doing all kinds of national interviews. She's been on the late night talk shows. She's all over CNN, MSNBC, and the right-wing people some of them want to drag her through the mud, definitely have bad intentions. Some of them just want to talk to her, and they'll challenge her to debates, which she's probably smart not to take, because why would you do a national debate against a conservative pundit when you're a local congressional candidate? But it's a bad look. It's a bad look either way. It's a bad look for both sides. Anytime you say, no, I won't debate you, that's going to make some people think, oh, you're afraid to defend your ideas. But anytime you call for a debate against someone who's not really involved with you, that also kind of makes you look like a bully a little bit. Ben Shapiro, who in general I think is pretty good, mostly, he's really hounding her, trying to get her to come on his show and have a discussion or a debate, and he comes across a little pushy. But hey, what are you going to do? That's how he makes a living. He's a pundit. He's not a political figure. He's a commentator. So I'm not here to dump on her. I've met her. I met her at Netroots Nation, not this year, but last year. She's a very nice lady. At the time I met her, I looked her up and saw who she was, and I was like, wow, good for her running for Congress, but she's running up against a really powerful, entrenched guy who's done 14 terms in a row or something like that. She's going to get crushed. And then the guy didn't take her seriously, and she ran an excellent campaign, and she beat him. So I was wrong there.
What's her background?
She has an economics degree from I don't remember where, maybe I want to say NYU, and she was working as a bartender until she started running for Congress. Some people jump out and they're like, "Oh yeah, some bartender. We don't need some unexperienced bartender in Congress." No, actually, I think that's exactly what we do need. We need steel plant workers and librarians and bartenders and restaurateurs and people in Congress, and less lawyers. So many freaking lawyers.
So many lawyers
in Congress. Just because you're responsible for making the law does not mean that you need to be a lawyer. It makes me, frankly, somewhat ill that lawyers who are generally very high-earning lawyers took over the government. So I'm fine with that. But what I don't understand is why is the Democratic National Committee and the chairperson of the DNC making such a big national deal out of her? They should have just waited until she won, because she's going to win. She's going to win the general election in November. Pretty much no question about it. She's in a super heavy Democrat-leaning district, and she's very popular locally. She's going to win unless she just, unless it comes out that she's actually in the KKK or something weird. She's going to win. They should have waited for her to win until they started trotting her out nationally, because she hasn't even been elected yet, and it really appears that nobody prepared her for the national stage. Now, I'm not saying she looks like a dummy or she's terrible or anything. I am saying that she goes on a big national interview, and they ask her things like, "How do you plan on paying for all these social programs you want?" And she's like, doesn't answer. Or, what do you think of the Israel and Palestine conflict? And she's like, "Oh, I'm not really an expert in that. That's not what I do." Okay, look, this you just needed some more time, Alexandria. Now, I'm not in love with a lot of her governmental ideas, because she's very Bernie Sanders-ish, gigantic government, social programs that I don't think will work in the United States. And we'll talk about those ideas. But she's not a dummy. She just needed time. She needed time and preparation, and I'm kind of worried that we took a pretty nice and very passionate young candidate, and we're kind of dragging her through the mud, and that's going to discourage young, passionate candidates from across the political spectrum from getting out there and running themselves.
I'm kind of surprised, too, that the DNC is making her such a sweetheart. I mean, they haven't really been exactly friendly historically with the whole democratic socialism thing. So no. Why are they that?
No, I'm going to come right out and say it's because she is young, and she is a woman, and she is Latina, and she is really pretty. So she's kind of the total package there for intersectional identity politics, which the Democrat Party loves. They don't care so much about her ideas as they do about putting her on TV and making her the poster child for their party, which otherwise is made up of Feinsteins and other old people with old ideas.
That's fair. That's a good idea. Yeah.
And that's a shame, because she does have a message. I don't agree with it, but she does have a message. She does have something to say. She is sincere in her beliefs, and she's very passionate. And I think that the DNC is doing her a big disservice, throwing her to the wolves like this. But maybe that's their goal. I don't know. You never know with these people. Some of the things she said, though, recently, I feel like I want to address a little bit. She was on Pod Save America, which is a really big podcast. Gets, I don't know, twice as many listeners as us, times 100. And they asked her a question about the upper middle class. And she said, the upper middle class doesn't exist anymore. So I thought, well, there's no way that's true.
Wait, huh?
Yeah, well, her point, her talking point is that there's the super rich, and then there's everybody else, and then there's poor people. And then that's pretty much it. That's all that exists. There's the downtrodden laborers, and then there's poor people, and then there's the 1%ers. So I looked up some statistics here, and myself and all of my coworkers at the power plant, we're all upper middle class, because if you look at the definition, according to Pew Research, that is a household of 3, which is what I'm in, so I didn't look up as many of the numbers for household of 4 or any of that stuff. But for me, a household of 3 with a combined income of over $100,000 and less than $389,000. So that's at $100,000, which is, I'm at the low end there, just over $100,000 for my household income. That's almost double the median income. So that's doing really well. I'm not going to complain about it. It ain't rich, that's for sure.
Right.
And
No doubt.
it is a very large and growing demographic. It's actually the fastest growing of all of the classes, the economic classes. So right now it is 29.5% of American households fall into that demographic. And that's twice as many as it was in 1979. So not only does the upper middle class, it doesn't not exist, it's actually twice as big as it was around the time Josh and I were born. So in our lifetime, we've seen that, relatively well off but not rich demographic double in size. Well, I think that's a good thing. Let's see. So upper class, that would be the 1%. That's people who make $390,000 or more in household income, which is a bunch. But if you live in New York City or in San Francisco and you're a family of three, so you need like a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, $390,000 starts to go away real fast.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco is, let's see, it's $41,000 a year for a 1 bedroom apartment in San Francisco.
Which is ridiculous.
That's unreal. That at that rate, it would only take me 4 years to pay off the house where I live. My house it's a decent sized suburban house in a good neighborhood. Priced out, I currently owe about $165,000 on it, and it's appraised for $192,000. So 4 or 5 years of paying rent in San Francisco, I could own this house in cash money. That's obscene. That's crazy. And that's a 1 bedroom in San Francisco versus a 4 bedroom good sized suburban house in southern Illinois.
And that's probably a pretty crappy 1 bedroom, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Because most of San Francisco is beat up and torn down.
Yeah, I'm not like out in the sticks either. There's no like meth being made in my neighborhood. We're 20 minutes from downtown St. Louis, which is one of the top 20 size major metropolitan areas. So, it's not exactly the boonies. Just in case you were wondering when I said southern Illinois, it's not like, it's not Effingham where there's like more cows than people. It's not
Right.
It's not a place like that where you can have a palace for this much money. It's just kind of the average for middle America. If you don't live in California or New York or Vermont, this is the kind of home you can expect to buy for that kind of money.
Yeah.
So it's the places where people live that make those upper end salaries cost a lot to live there. And the people that are like millionaires and fly around in private jets, that's the extreme minority. That's very, very small amount of people. And this whole class that's all lumped in together, the upper class of people living in San Francisco and the super rich, that's all lumped into upper class, which is the 1%. Then you get to the middle class, just the regular old middle. That's 42% of Americans, so almost half. The rest of everybody is either lower middle class or they're below the poverty line. And speaking of the poverty line, I know poverty is a problem, and we're not going to ignore it, and we're not going to pretend it doesn't exist. But currently 14% of Americans live above the poverty line, which is just a little bit over half what it used to be 50 years ago. So we've cut poverty just about in half in a generation. So this is why when we start talking about making big, giant changes to the social and economic system, I say, whoa, 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 pump the brakes. Because we've cut violent crime in half in 30 years, and we've cut poverty in half in 50 years. We've doubled the amount of people in 40 years who are in the upper middle class, and all of those trends are continuing. Poverty continues to go down, violent crime continues to go down, the upper middle class continues to go up. Those are all good things. And I don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe tweak it here and there. Make life, even poor people deserve to have good lives. We're a rich country. So do a little bit more to help them if you can, but let's not turn this whole apple cart on its head and screw up what we've been doing, correctly for the last generation.
Right. The whole aspect of socioeconomics, it's like a giant cruise ship that goes really, really, really slow, but it moves, and you're not going to get one person to go in there and massively change things, and all of a sudden it's going to be like everyone gets free gas. Like usually every president that comes along, people are like, I'm not going to have to pay for anything. I'm going to get free gas. I'm going to get a pony. Like, no, you're not. You're not. That's not how it works.
The president's not the emperor, and even if he was, the emperor is not in the business of giving free ponies to every person in their country. It just doesn't work like that because they don't have the money to do that. So one of the things, like all those statistics I just threw out in a big jumble there, you can check those out. They very closely match between Gallup polling and Pew Research. I used the Pew Research numbers, but Gallup polling came up with almost identical numbers. So I did research on both of those. But what that comes to me is when Miss Ocasio-Cortez or Donald Trump or any other politician, they all say this, they say the middle class is shrinking. We're losing the middle class in this country. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, because almost everybody considers themselves to be middle class. Just about everyone considers themselves to be middle class. Everybody you see on TV, like everybody in a sitcom, they're all middle class to some degree or another. And you worry like, oh no, it's shrinking. That means I'm going to be poor, right? Well, according to these statistics, the middle class is shrinking because they're actually graduating to the upper middle class.
There's shrinkage.
The
like
upper
a frightened turtle.
Yeah, the higher earning class is growing. The lower earning class below middle class is shrinking. And middle class is shrinking. So where are they going? They're not just dying and leaping off the face of the earth. So it seems like they must be moving in the direction of the more money demographic.
So the Jeffersons.
Yeah, that's good. They're moving on up to the east side, and I'm happy to see that. I did it when
Yeah, I did too.
We weren't born in the death throes of poverty, but neither did our parents have just colossal amounts of money to throw around.
Right.
My mom and dad lived with my dad's mom and dad, and dad still lives there. Now he's disabled, and grandma is older, and grandpa has passed away. They all live together and take care of each other now. But when I was young, we did it for economic reasons because they couldn't afford to live alone it was a couple of years when I was real small. And then once they got on their feet, they realized like, oh, we kind of like this living arrangement, and we stuck with it. But they weren't rich. Even once they got further in their careers, they never got to be like super rich people. But then me starting out working at the bowling alley, going through college and working my way through that, I'm not rich now either, but I'm doing pretty well for myself. I don't worry about whether there's going to be food or anything. So I'm financially more successful than my parents were, which is the goal. I want my son to be more financially successful than I was.
Right.
So that's moving in the right direction, both as like an anecdote between the two of us. We've seen ourselves become more successful thanks in part to the efforts of our parents, and our class status increasing. I want to keep that going, and the statistics nationwide kind of bear that out, that it's happening for a lot of people. Now, like we said before, we're not going to ignore the plight of the people at the bottom, because it is terrible to live in soul-crushing generational poverty. So stuff can be done for them, and sane, sensible things that will help them, I'm going to be all for. But we have to look very carefully at those policies and make sure they don't sink the giant cruise ship of the economy that you alluded to.
Totally agree, man.
Yeah, so just be careful when some politician tells you the middle class is shrinking. They're trying to scare you, but it's actually good news that it's shrinking. Pretty soon they're going to have to redefine what middle class is, because there will be more people living above that line than there are below it. And they'll be like, well, it's not really the middle anymore, it's most people.
You'll hear sob stories of people who don't have unlimited data on their phone plans, and how that needs to be right for everyone. And I don't know, I'm just spitballing, but
yeah, I don't get it. We have it's about 70% of the people in the country are middle class or below. About 14% are in poverty, which means between the middle class and the lower middle class, you have just a little bit over half the country, but you also got a third of the country and growing that's in that upper class or upper middle class. So we're going the right way. I don't want to screw it up. She says things like we don't spend enough money investing in people, and we need to do more for healthcare and education and things like that. And hey, you know what? Our education system is kind of screwed up. Josh works in higher education and just graduated from a graduate level class, just got his master's. So you can, and you went through public school just like I did. So you've seen the perils of that system all over the place. But every single American kid gets a basic education, full free. And here's what worries me when we say things about like college for all. We should pay for college for everyone. Well, there's a couple things I hate about that. One of them is not everybody should go to college.
Right.
And I'm not saying this because you're too dumb or I don't want you becoming educated. I don't want the proletariat to become literate and rise up against us, the bourgeoisie. No, I'm saying that not everybody enjoys book learning. Some people like working on cars. Some people like welding. Some people are exceptionally good at things that you need to go to a vocational school for, or things that you don't need a post-secondary education for at all. And we need those folks, and I'm glad that we have them. I work with them every day. I have a bachelor's, which I needed to do the highly technical work that I do. But there are folks at the plant that make a very good living that are in this upper middle class that don't have college degrees because they didn't need them for what they do.
Right.
It's harder to get opportunities if you don't have a degree, but if you know where to look, they are there. The bigger thing that I worry about if we're sending everybody to college on the public dime is, Josh, you got a master's in theology. What was your bachelor's? What was the title of that
theology.
Degree? Yeah,
theology.
Yeah, it's theology related. I didn't know what the title of it was. If it was
biblical study or Bible and theology, something like that.
Biblical studies and theology, something like that. So if the government was paying for everybody to go to college, how long before they're looking at the budget of paying tuitions and they're like, I'm getting tired of paying for people to go and major in art and philosophy and filmmaking and theology, and we need more people to major in mechanical engineering. So, Josh, you're a mechanical engineer now. You're basically getting assigned a vocational path by the state. And that's not just like quasi-socialism that everybody, gets weird, scared about. That's the USSR there. That's saying like, you know what? I don't care, their beautiful mind, that you're actually super smart. I don't care their goodwill hunting, that you were able to solve the proof up on the chalkboard. You're going to be a janitor forever because that's what the state has outlined for you. That's what you're going to be. You're going to be a welder because we need more welders. Well, I suck at it and I hate it. I don't care. That's what you are.
It's funny because when you say that, I'm sure a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's just sensationalism and that'll never happen." And it reminds me of a time. It's just probably last year where it's like a prominent author and on a blog he was talking about. He got political and he was talking about how socialism didn't work before because we didn't have technology. And he was like, well, what if we had like a computer system that could like gauge? And he used restaurants as an example, and was like, well, what if, all this aggregate data that's collected through search engines and whatnot, we could tell like, oh, there's too many Chinese restaurants in this area. Instead, we should put an Italian restaurant or a Greek restaurant or something. And so socialism would work in that sense because we have all this data and everyone's like, oh man, that's a great idea. And I was like, what if somebody doesn't want to build an Italian restaurant?
Yeah.
And so are you going to force people? And then all of a sudden it was like a bomb. It was like, like,
we're going to take this Chinese family that started a restaurant, and they're doing okay for themselves. They're doing all right, but there's no Italian restaurants in town. So the government's going to come in and say, you know what, Mr. Ching, you and your family are here running a restaurant, so what would be the big deal if you just made cannoli instead of egg rolls? I mean, you wrap them up the same. Who gives a shit? Yeah, Well, it's because I should be free to make whatever I want. If a Chinese immigrant family came over and said, we make super good lasagna, we are Chang's Lasagna Palace, they can still do that.
Right.
But under a socialist system, then there'd be people saying, like, oh, no, you can't. You're Chinese. You make egg rolls.
Yeah. And you have to, and it's better for you anyway because you'll make more money. Don't you want more money? What if you just don't want to make cannoli?
Yeah. We have known, playing in bands and stuff, we've known plenty of people who are like semi-pro musicians that they keep their jobs as like waiters and, hotel workers and stuff way longer than they otherwise would have because they also got their side gig, playing
right.
with the local hotshots, maybe even getting in the recording studio once in a while with some of the bigger name bands doing like, overlays for them and stuff because they're passionate about it. And you tell them like, dude, you're so good at civil engineering and you already got your degree. Why don't you go and do that job? Because it wouldn't leave me time to do what I really care about. I'm keeping my rent paid, brother. Let me do what I want to do.
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks like that. Almost everybody listening, you probably know somebody like that. And their mom is probably like, oh, my little Johnny's not living up to his potential. But little Johnny's like, man, this is awesome. I have a job that I don't really hate, keeps food on the table, and I get to do what I'm super passionate about that I love so much on the weekends or at night because of the flexible schedule. Now, if Johnny Law gets to come and say, like, no, you have a civil engineering degree that the government paid for, you're a civil engineer now, and you can't play guitar anymore because you don't have time because you're putting in 60 hours a week building parks or what the hell ever a civil engineer does. That would suck. That'd be terrible. That is every conservative and every libertarian's worst nightmare. And I don't want to jump on the slippery slope argument, but when you're looking at the government pays for this stuff, that is not a slippery slope like 20 steps away from they tell you what to do with it. That's like one step away from
That's a good point.
They tell you what to do with it.
That's a really good point.
Like if you're on Section 8 subsidized housing because you can't afford your rent, which my wife and I were for a couple of years, you don't get to just live wherever you want. You got to live in a Section 8 development.
Right.
You got to live where the government tells you to live. So that's a massive worry for me. I don't want the government to be able to tell me or anybody what I can or cannot be interested in or what I can and cannot learn. Now, just like the class issue with there being people in poverty who need help, the education system needs help. Student loans are a bubble. And holy shit, do your hosts ever know that? Because we both owe.
Oh dear God!
Thanks degrees for helping us get into a career, but now we both owe many, many years worth of career earnings in student loans. Yeah. I've been paying mine off for like 9 years now, and I don't feel like they're any smaller. And now that you're graduated, my friend, you get to feel that same thing. Before it was anxiety hovering over your head. Now it's going to start stabbing you in the neck.
Yeah, that's why I just kept going to school, just because I was like, I'm gonna, like, I will embrace the sweet grip of death before I have to pay these damn loans back.
I don't want a doctorate, and I don't need it, but I can't pay my student loans right now.
I almost thought about it, and one of the big reasons was, hey, I could delay the inevitable for a bit longer. I have a doctorate, but I'm stupid.
Yeah. Well, we know another. Or at least I know another a guy who does have a doctorate in religious studies, and he was like a career student until he was 40 something, partially because he couldn't even fathom paying back his student loans, being a religious studies guy. Like, what do you do with that degree? Well, basically you have to teach religious studies,
right?
You teach, or you hope against hope that your ideas are groundbreaking or intriguing enough that you can start getting published, and you start putting out published work that you can actually get paid for.
Yeah.
And the amount of people buying books on comparative religion is getting smaller all the time. That's a tough market.
Yep. Yeah, my one of my professors, when I talked to him about a PhD program, he said, oh, and by the way, to get a PhD, you have to do a dissertation, which pretty much is a book that brings something new and original to the already 2,000 years of dudes. So good luck with that. I'm like, maybe I don't want to do this after all.
Yeah, one of my good buddies up in Chicago has a doctorate in robotics, and that's super cool, and it was a lot of work. And he's like, when I did my dissertation, I went to defend it, I was one of the first people to graduate the doctorate program, so it wasn't, like, obviously it was hard, but it was easier to pick a topic that I could shed new light on and give new development to. When you're talking about, like, Judaism and Christianity,
Yeah.
where the basis has been laid down almost since the beginning of writing as a human race. Like, the ideas started getting laid down almost immediately when we invented paper and ink. It's real hard to introduce a new idea in that.
Yep. How'd you do 50,000 words on the hair lice of the Israelites between these periods? How did? Yeah.
It's real hard to look at too, because especially like any human science like theology or anthropology, it's almost entirely done in the library, right, and through research. It's not like it's not like you had to go to the Wailing Wall and take measurements of it, or you didn't have to go and walk the stations of the cross and measure how far apart they were, that kind of thing. It's all about research. It's all about reading. So you find people that you really love, and you're like, oh man, I really love C.S. Lewis. I could write more about what he wrote. And then you see like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how many books that dude wrote, apart from not only the books, but the papers and the correspondence with other theologians. Like, this guy thought of everything, dang it.
I know. Like, I'm just adding to the noise. Well, I think that's why there's a lot of, even in any anthropological field, there's some there's some weird stuff out there, because I just think people are like, oh man, well, everything's taken, so God's a duck.
Yeah.
50,000 words on how God's a duck.
And now in the age of the internet, you can't just find some crazy person's dissertation that they wrote and never tried to defend or publish and copy it, because they can just do a Google plagiarism review and catch you in 10 seconds.
Right.
Like, hey, you used commas in the same pattern as this guy, you're expelled.
Yep. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a darn shame. Anyway, back to government spending. We do spend a lot on the humanities, on investing in people. And when I ask people, like, what do you think is our number one expenditure in the budget? People almost always say it's the military. It's the military, because they've seen this pie chart where the military is like half the pie. And it's all military spending. We spend so much on it. Well, the military, including the VA and all veterans benefits and medical care and research and development for weapons and paying our current infrastructure costs and our current soldiers and all that stuff all together is 16% of the federal budget. So that's about $1 in every $7 that the government spends. It spends on the military. Well, that's a bunch. It's more than any other developed nation. And we could do a whole show on that. I love that line. We used a lot. We could do a whole show on our military budget. And my main point would be that our Navy patrols all of the shipping lanes for all of the trade for all of the world. And if somebody else would like to assume the cost of doing that, knock yourselves the hell out. But until then, if you want to have global trade and you don't want to have pirates like we did back in the 1600s, America's going to have to keep spending a bunch of money on its military.
Yeah.
And love Trump or hate him, I know a lot of people hate him, but when he goes over to NATO and tells them, like, hey, you need to spend more money on your military, people are like, oh my gosh, what a bully. What kind of savages? Why do they need to spend more money on their military? Well, military spending around the world is kind of a zero-sum game. Somebody has to do it. Right now we're doing it, and Trump's saying, like, hey, you should do it. You should do some of it. Start paying for your own defense so we wouldn't have to do it. And there's going to be like the war hawks who say, like, oh no, we need all our military bases in Korea and Japan and Germany and all those places to increase the reach of the United States. And there's some merit to that argument. But as long as we're paying the bulk of the defense for the world, it's really tough to cut military spending. And we've already got tanks and planes that are like rust buckets. It's something like, for every one American that dies in combat, three or four die in training exercises.
Really?
Because of faulty airplanes and helicopters and bad equipment and things that they just didn't have the money to upgrade or replace.
Wow.
My aunt, she her first husband was in the military, and that's the father of her oldest son. And he was killed. He was a field medic for the army in Afghanistan, and he was going to, he was being flown in a helicopter, a Black Hawk, out to where there were some wounded soldiers. And that's what he did. He'd drag you off the line if you were wounded. He'd work on you in a foxhole or in the helicopter or in a Humvee and get you back to the field hospital where fully trained surgeons would take over from there. Well, his helicopter crashed. Not because it got shot, not because of RPGs, but because of engine failure.
Jeez.
So, we're losing as many guys or more guys to equipment that is breaking because we don't do the proper maintenance on it because we don't have the money, as we do to enemy roadside bombs and bullets. So, I'm not that conservative in a lot of areas, but you're never ever going to convince me that our fighting men and women don't deserve the best of the best of the best material and resources, and I'm willing to pay in taxes to make that happen. But still, that's only $1 in every $7 that our federal budget spends. Our number one expenditure, by far, is Social Security. If you add Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare together, our three biggest humanities spending programs, that's 2 out of every $3 that the government spends. 65% of the entire federal budget every year, it goes to Social Security and Medicaid. My grandmother's on Social Security, and my father is on Medicaid because he's disabled. And they need those programs. Otherwise they'd be out on the street. I don't have the money to pay my mortgage and their taxes and stuff. So obviously those programs are important. And I'm happy to keep paying for them. It's the mismanagement of the money is why the money is gone. Like people say, it's I pay into Social Security so that I can retire and have Social Security. No, you pay into Social Security and I pay into Social Security so that my grandma can get a check. Because the money that she paid into Social Security, somebody took it and spent it on some study about whether honeybees can be gay or something weird. And the short answer is, if honeybees can't be gay, I'll be kind of surprised because they're like 99% female. But we mismanage. It's all worker bees are all female. But it's so weird that we took. Well, I guess it's not weird because it's the government. But we took all that money and we mismanaged it. We wasted it, and we basically stole it from future generations. And now those of us that are working now are paying for the people who are retired. Well, pretty soon, as the baby boomers all start to age out, which is very, very soon, there's going to be more people that need to get Social Security, and there's not going to be enough people who are paying into it. And one of these times is going to go bankrupt. We already spend 2/3 of our federal budget on these programs. We're going to run out of money if they keep getting bigger. So when we say Medicare for all, how the hell are we going to pay for Medicare for everybody if we already spend 2/3 of our money just giving it to the people that already get it and giving Social Security to the people that already get it? It would mean a complete overhaul of the system from the ground up. And I don't think there's the political willpower in existence in either party to do that.
Right.
To do single-payer health care, which there are valid reasons to do single-payer health care, there are valid reasons to not do it also. But to do that, you basically have to tell every insurance company that exists, like, hey, you know what, guys? I know this is wildly outside our constitutional authority, but you don't exist anymore, Blue Cross. You're gone. You don't exist.
Right.
Now all the health insurance is just going to be tax revenue and is going to be paid back out by the government. And we don't need all of you middlemen and salespeople anymore. You're gone. And that would be how many hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs? No senator, no congressperson, no president is going to say, yeah, we're just going to get rid of this whole industry and the government will take it over. Don't worry, we can handle it. Look how good we handle the VA, the Veterans Affairs,
right.
Veterans Administration. That's free health care for retired military personnel or people who are discharged because of injury. That's great health care, right? No, it sucks. It sucks real bad, and there's a really long wait time for it. That's government-run health care, and it's basically proof that the government is not ready to run your health care.
Yeah, but
Our current system blows. I had to take my wife to the urgent care not long ago because she had a migraine that was so bad. She had never had a migraine before. I've been getting them since I was 10. She started getting them this spring. She thought something was really wrong with her, like she was having a stroke or something. I suspected it was a migraine, but I'm not a doctor. and I'm not going to let her lay in bed and die, get a brain aneurysm and like a blood vessel pop.
Right.
And my wife is dead because I was like, it's just a headache. Quit being a pussy.
Yeah, you're fine.
Quit being a pussy. No, we're going to go to the urgent care. We go to the urgent care. It costs thousands of dollars for them to hold us there for 2 or 3 hours and then send her home with some pain medication and basically tell her, it's a migraine, quit being a pussy.
Right.
They were really mean to us. The customer service was crappy. They were very rude. They were very dismissive of both of us. It started out as, why didn't you take her to the emergency room, you negligent monster? She's going to die here in this place. And an hour later, it was like, why'd you bring her in at all? You should have just given her some aspirin, stupid. I'm like, wow, that was a pretty wide swing. But yeah, and that amazing service cost us thousands of dollars. I got a kink in my small intestine a couple years ago, like a dog would. Like if this happened to Santa's little helper, you'd be thinking like, well, I guess we got to put him down because we're not going to pay for the surgery. It ended up getting corrected without surgery, but I had to go to the emergency room, and I was in the hospital for 2 nights. We were paying on that for like a year, and we got pretty good health insurance. So I'm not saying that the current system is awesome. I am saying that the government sucks real bad and is not ready to take it over.
I've always said, because especially the whole healthcare issue is so polarizing, and I've told my conservative friends, hey, when somebody says, hey, nationalize healthcare, in and of itself, it's not a bad idea. But then I've told my liberal friends, hey, you can't get mad when somebody asks, but how are we going to pay for it? One's a good idea, and one's a good question, and because I don't think anybody would care, like, hey, we could give everyone free healthcare, and with little consequences, fantastic. But where's the evidence that we can do that?
Yeah,
that's where I want to know.
If tomorrow it just started raining robot doctors from an alien race, and they just gave them all to us, and now these robot doctors, they can take care of you, and they can manufacture their own pharmaceuticals inside themselves, and you never have to pay for any of it. Welcome to the Galactic Society. It really is free. I'd be like, bitchin'. That's the greatest thing that's ever happened to the human race. But it's not gonna. Doctors still have to get paid. Part of the reason healthcare is so expensive in the United States is we have a massive healthcare shortage. Like, there's a big shortage of doctors. You're like, why is that, Ken? Doctors get paid so much money. Well, compared to the hell that you go through to become a medical doctor, you don't actually make that much money. Especially if you work in a hospital or an emergency room, or if you're a general practitioner. You don't actually make that much money, and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt, and you have to make it through medical school and residency, which is one of the worst practices in labor in the world. Residency is, it is terrible. When we take these people and they were like, okay, you're all done with your education, you are responsible for saving other human lives now, and oh, by the way, you're going to work like 80 hours a week, so you're so exhausted you can't think while you're making these important decisions.
Life or death decisions, yeah.
And we're basically going to pay you minimum wage. But don't worry, it's only for like 3 years.
Yeah.
Before you get to be a real doctor.
Yeah. And if you screw up, the same consequences. Oh,
yeah, if you make one real mistake, you're out of here. You don't get to be a doctor anymore. So it's no wonder when people are like, you know what, I could make just about as much money being like a high-level x-ray technician, and nobody dies if I do it wrong. I think I'm going to do that. Yeah. So we have a severe shortage of doctors, and that's one of the things that makes going to the doctor so friggin' expensive. So making everything government run, I'm worried that it's not going to do anything about that shortage. And I'm also worried, like, one of the greatest things about America is that it's diverse. And not social justice warrior, like, oh, diversity is everything, and you got to have an Asian kid in every commercial. In every top Copper Tone commercial, you got to have an Asian kid and a black girl, and you have like a white guy over here, and you got to have like a gay couple in the background. You got to make sure everybody's no, not that kind of diversity, not like meeting quotas. I'm talking about, like, we have so many different people from so many different cultures and backgrounds and ideologies and ideas, and yes, skin colors and sexual orientations. We have everything. We have all that stuff in a big soup, the melting pot soup. That makes America great. And we have every different kind of landscape. We have deserts, we have glaciers, we have tropical islands, we have great plains, we have mountains, we have swamps, we have everything. Every different landscape on Earth, except for like deep jungle, we have it. And we have a bunch of empty space in between all those things. That makes it next to impossible to come up with an end-all solution for anything. You can't just have a one-size-fits-all solution for healthcare. Okay, well, black people are more likely to have strokes. Women are more likely to have osteoporosis. White men are more likely to have high cholesterol. My doctor told me, because I'm not a white man.
Average size. No.
I forgot already. But anyway, every different ethnic group is susceptible to different diseases. So how do you position your resources? If you're a doctor that specializes in strokes, but you live in Montana, is the government, now that they run the healthcare, be like, well, sorry, you got to live in downtown Detroit now, because that's where black people are, and they have more strokes, and we need you there. Like, well, I don't want to. Too bad.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's a really good point.
That's the problem when the government basically becomes the one corporation, the one company that runs everything in an industry. Because like stroke specialist doctor in Montana could just say like, well, I'll stay here and I won't get to treat that many strokes, but I'll get to live where I want to live. And his company, since they only do business in Montana, they'd be like, yeah, of course you can. Yeah. But if he works for a giant national employer, like the government would be, they could say, well, you can move to Detroit where there's more strokes, or you can find yourself a new vocation. You can be a welder or something. You can't go to a healthcare competitor because there's no such thing. So if you want to continue to be a doctor, you're going to do what we tell you to do. Huh. Well, that blows. It's a big problem in a country this size and this diverse with this many different situations to try to come up with any one solution that works for everything. That's why education and policing...
Freedom, baby.
Yeah. That's why education and policing are still done at the local level, because I would be terrified if there were federal police. There are local police departments that suck. That suck so bad. Every time you hear about a cop shooting an unarmed guy, and it turns out to be true, which many times, unfortunately, it does, that's a pretty good indicator that local police department sucks. But most of them are great. And if you have a federal police department where they're running everything and they're trying to have the same rules for every jurisdiction, for every different thing, well, in like the Deep South, you need Andy Mayberry. And in downtown Chicago, you need, maybe a little heavier hand. And here in the suburbs, you need something a little different. Now, yes, you need better policies and you need equality and you need all that stuff, but you don't need the same thing everywhere. That's dangerous.
That's a really good point.
So yeah,
but people don't see that. People just see, here's the problem. Here's a simple problem that is one-sided but revolves around my whole brain, and therefore we need to change it and do something about it. And they can't see past that.
Well, that's one of the things that's really hard about like the Twitter culture, where everything has to fit in a neat little package. And it's not just, it's not solely social media's fault. It's been coming ever since like the rise of radio and television, basically. Like you listen to Little Orphan Annie on the radio, yeah, it might be tune in next week to see how she does with the pirates, but there was an encapsulated story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end just in this 15 minutes of radio. And if you watched an episode of Friends, the story today about cooking Thanksgiving dinner with lumpy mashed potatoes or whatever it was had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it was all over in 30 minutes. And even though that problem seemed really complex, boy, darned if they didn't figure it out in a half an hour. Darned if Mayberry RFD didn't turn out just fine in a half an hour. Well, the real world doesn't turn out just fine in a half an hour. You can't plug in a simple solution to fix a complex problem because it won't work. There are no round holes and there are no square pegs in the real world. Every peg looks like a crazy fractal algorithm, and every hole is a jagged bullet wound, and they don't fit into each other. You have to be really, really subtle to make them work.
Well, that's a good point. And people that think that way, then they wonder, well, why doesn't the government just do this? Because clearly it's going to fix the problem. Why don't they plug the hole that's leaking? If they don't, therefore they're evil. So you get that whole narrative of, well, he's just a terrible person, and whoever voted for him or her is a terrible person, and then that's how you get the nonsense that we're always dealing with. It seems.
Yeah, there's a really good documentary about that simplistic line of thinking. It's called Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. And Anakin is having his discussion with Padme about how we need someone that just comes up with all the solutions and implements them. And she's like, well, that's what we do. We have a Senate, but we don't all agree on what the solutions are. And he's like, well, somebody should make them. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's like your dictator foreshadowing there. That's what that is. If you want to just implement a solution because you think it's a good idea, you got to be a dictator. You got to be a fascist.
Right. Yeah. He was dumb and a terrible actor. Let that be a lesson to you.
Yes. Sorry, Hayden. I know you listen to the show, but those movies sucked.
They were terrible.
Anyway, we have another really big picture topic going on here tonight. We have an article that got published about discrimination against trans people in dating, against transgender people in dating. So a recent study found that only about 3% of straight people would be open to dating a transgender person. And so the article that I saw this study cited in called that discrimination. They said we got a long way to go before we reach equality. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but we're in a disclaimer here. I love disclaimers on this show. Trans people, you deserve 100% equal rights. If you're transgender and you're listening to the show, or if you know someone who is transgendered, that person deserves 100% equal rights. And next season, I'm really, really hoping to get some people in like unique situations or different stuff that we don't have a perspective on the show to educate us about them. Like, I want to get a trans person on the show to educate us about transgender issues so we can have a discussion, not a debate. I don't want to argue with them. I want them to teach us. I want you to have equality. I want to listen and hear what you have to say. But if I was single and I was looking for a lady, I'm 35 years old, right? Which means if I want to have any more kids, I need to do it real soon. I don't want to have any more kids, by the way. But if I did, I would need to do it real soon. Otherwise, I'd get to the point where I'm too old to like play catch with them and shit when I grow up. I'm not going to date someone who's not capable of having kids. Now, if it was a woman who I just absolutely fell for and we found out later that she had infertility issues, then, that's a struggle that people deal with, but it's not something that we set out knowing. If you're a transgender person, I know, as soon as I get with you, you can't have babies. Because even if you did a transition surgeries and took hormones, that did not insert a uterus into you. And even if you look like a woman and things go really well on the first few dates and then we come home and the clothes come off and you got a wee-wee, that don't work for me.
Yeah.
You're a great person and I love spending time with you, but I already got a wee-wee. I don't need another one. We talked a minute ago about square pegs and round holes. Guess what? I got a peg already. I don't need no more peg.
Yeah.
And I'm not gay. So if you are gay, that's great. Good for you. You're fine. But I'm not. So I want a lady with lady bits that actually do lady bit stuff. That's not discrimination.
No.
We make one of the big talking points in the LGBT movement is you're born being attracted to who you're attracted to. If you're a man and you like other men, that's just what you are. That's just, you were born that way. I'll accept that. I am 100%. I accept that. Why? I'm not going to call you a liar. You tell me you were born that way, why would I call you a liar? So, fine. I was born wanting to date women who have always been women, who have all of the physical characteristics of women. That's not discrimination. It's just the way I was born. You get to live your life and I get to live my life.
Man, that's a really good way to go, pointing out the double standard there. I like women. I like them to have lady parts. That's what I was born with. But how is that?
Yeah.
How's that discrimination? And where do we stop if that's discrimination? Guys with micro penis, have a harder time getting a date than guys who don't have a micro penis. Is that discrimination? Well, no. It's unfortunate, but is it like a systematic sort of discrimination? Well, no.
Well, yeah, it's like there's gays and lesbians, gay men, it was only about 10 or 12%, and I forgot to write it down, unfortunately, that would date a transgender man, someone who had transitioned to become a man. About 30% of lesbians said they would date a trans woman, someone who had transitioned to be a woman. Not to be too crass, but that's probably because if you're a trans woman and you transition to become a woman, you can still do the stuff to your lesbian partner that a regular woman would be able to do. So the acceptance rate is a little higher there. But it's still only about 30%, about 1 in 3. Even 13% of trans people said they wouldn't date another trans person. So it's like 1 out of 7 trans people are like, no, I want a natural born cisgendered person of the gender that I'm attracted to. I don't think that's discrimination. I think it's just you like what you like. You can't tell people who to be attracted to.
Man, those 83% of those darn discriminatory transgender people.
Yeah.
It just disgusts me.
And here's the part that might sound controversial. And I'll say it even in a nice little soundbite that somebody can clip out and make me look like a dick. It sucks to be transgendered. It does. It's not polite to call it a mental illness because it's not a mental illness, and there's stigma that comes along with mental illness. But you were born in the wrong kind of body. Your brain, your spirit doesn't agree that you are what you are. Like, you don't have the right equipment for what you want to be. That blows. Right. That sucks for you. I feel bad that happened to you. And I wish we could do more to help you and absolutely live your best life, be what you want to be comfortable with yourself, and I want to help you be the best you can. But if we want to just bury our heads in the sand and pretend like, oh no, everything's totally the same. They're totally the same. They're not the same. They were born with a giant disadvantage. That'd be like saying to a kid that was born with one arm who can't get into the NBA, be like, well, that's discrimination. Well, it's not discrimination. He doesn't have another arm. He's an amazing athlete, but you need to be able to dribble with both hands, and you don't got another hand. That sucks for you, and I feel bad for you. And I want you to come to terms with it, and I want you to do everything. And there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a bad person, or you're not defective, you're not any of that stuff. You're still a fully complete human being with a fully complete soul, but you have a physical disadvantage. Being transgendered is a physical disadvantage that you were born with. And that just, some people are less lucky, and that sucks, and I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, but you can't make people change who they want to date and marry and be with.
Yeah.
But I don't. Then again, this isn't a bad point. I mean, I'm feeling a little like righteous indignation against, like, I would assume the 85% of girls in high school that didn't want to date me.
Yeah, that's discrimination for sure.
I'd say 1 out of every 7 did want to date us. Maybe, is that fair?
I bet if they could see how the rest of our lives turned out, they would change their mind. Probably.
Totally.
That's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, if they could have seen the way the guys they were dating, the way their lives turned out, like, definitely for sure would have turned and changed their mind. I know you're thinking the same guy.
No, totally. We're yeah.
Josh laughing.
We had that. Yep.
We've talked about that on the show before. The hell with that guy. Have fun working at the world's last blockbuster video. Anyway, but like this whole thing that we just talked about, it's so hard for me to articulate because I don't want to sound like I'm against trans people. But this is why I don't think that the LGBT thing is a good idea. Like lumping in transgender people with gay people in the same advocacy group, I don't think it's a good idea because they face way different issues. I think they need their own advocacy group, and I understand why they did it in the first place. Because nobody's going to pay attention to transgender people because either people didn't know that they existed or they treated them like a joke for forever, basically, until 10 or 15 years ago, maybe even more recent than that. So they needed to be lumped in with a bigger group that had maybe a little more lobbying power or a little more visibility. But now that it's a little more accepted and people have learned about the issue a little more, I really think they need their own group that can focus more on the things that affect them rather than the things
That's
that affect gays and lesbians. And I don't know what some of the other letters stand for, honestly. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just don't. Q, I think, stands for either queer or questioning, and A is asexual, and I intersexual.
I think intersex. Yeah.
Intersex. I don't even know what all of those terms mean. I would love to get someone on the show to explain to them explain to me in a polite way what they all mean, because Googling and looking it up, it just hasn't done it for me. It hasn't made the issue seep into my brain. Like, I'm still having trouble understanding what it means. But all those people, good on you. Live the way you want to live. It's fantastic. But I think that trans people just have different issues, and they need their own group. But I don't want them to get left out in the cold either. So I'm not the boss of their advocacy groups. So maybe they know better than me. I hope they know better than me. But it just seems to me like it would be more efficient than that way.
Sure.
But you can't call everything discrimination. So calling, I would rather date a woman than a cis woman than a trans woman. You can't call that discrimination, because not everything's discrimination. And calling everything discrimination is just piling on to the cry wolf effect. And eventually, people are going to stop listening. That's the fear, anyway.
Yeah. You're not doing your cause any good when you take it to these extremes.
Yeah, absolutely. Fight and fight hard to get your equality, but pick your battles. Like, try to look at the stuff that actually affects your life every day and label it correctly, because you're at a disadvantage. There aren't that many of you, and it's a new issue for many people. They don't understand it, including me. I don't fully understand it. So you gotta be careful, choosing a hill to die on. And straight people don't want to date me, I don't think is the hill you want to die on right now.
Yeah.
Especially now that we're in like the Match.com, technology age, where it'll be harder, but it is possible to find the people that will want to date you. Like, I don't see what the alternative is anyway. Like, what are you gonna pass a law that says, hey, it's illegal to not want to date transgender women?
Right.
That's unenforceable. What do you mean? The same thing comes in when people are like, oh, we should just get rid of all the Nazis. I'm like, well, yeah, real legit neo-Nazis, they suck and they're awful people. And we can ostracize them from society, but what are you going to pass a law that says it's illegal to hate Jews? How do you enforce that? They have like a helmet on people, and when they start thinking nasty things about Jews, it shocks them. I don't think that'll work.
Boy, that's a Black Mirror Twilight Zone episode right there.
Yeah. Some people just suck. We're not going to be able to get rid of that. We can become as enlightened a society as is possible. We could become like Star Trek's enlightenment level, and there's still going to be people that suck. Like, you don't see them on the Enterprise because they don't make Starfleet, but in the Star Trek universe, I bet you that there are just some toothless hillbillies that hate black people. And, and that is extended. I hate black Vulcans too. I hate Tuvok so much. That black Vulcan bitch. Those people still exist in Star Trek world. There's not as many of them, and we've learned to ignore them, and they can just go live on an island or something. But they exist. There's no getting rid of people who just suck big time.
Well, I remember one of the episodes. I mean, they had penal colonies still, and they just ostracized. They just separated those people that sucked. Yeah. So, but they existed. They did.
Just gonna chuck you onto a planet where nobody will pay attention to you anymore. It's not that. That's how we got Australia.
Yeah.
It's planet Australia now. That would be great if we started doing intergalactic colonization, and the first planet we used as a penal colony, we just named it New Australia. And all the Aussies would be like, oi! They'd be all pissed about it and be like,
no. Then they'd be like, oh, I guess you got a point.
That'd be amazing. Anyway, man, we don't usually start the show with big, heavy issues. Oh.
Yeah, we went right for it.
But now we get to end the show with issues that are not so heavy-hitting and hard to talk about. Let's see. We got to talk about this because every podcast talks about it. The Oscars have added a popular film category. Did you see this madness?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm like, what? Why?
Yeah, they haven't fully announced the rules for it or the qualifications, but it's basically we're going to have a category for achievement in popular film, which basically by default means that all the Best Picture winners are going to be unpopular film. They're going to keep giving Best Picture to like foreign language films that nobody gives a damn about, and the outstanding achievement in popular film is just going to be a code word for Best Marvel movie. There's legitimately there's people, and I can't discount this argument, that are saying they only did this because they're afraid to pass over Black Panther for an Oscar because they want to look more inclusive.
Interesting.
And Black Panther was a real good movie. I don't know if I've seen like a better movie. It was a formulaic Marvel movie,
Yeah.
But I haven't seen a whole lot of like heavy hitter Oscar bait movies this year, so I don't know if Black Panther would really deserve Best Picture. But boy, are they scared to not give it something because there was so much conversation around it. Remember when we had our episode where we talked about Black Panther? I was afraid of getting called a racist. I was terrified that I wouldn't like it, and then when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, it's pretty good, but it's not my favorite Marvel movie." I was scared, like, "Oh man, you gotta dial that opinion back. You're gonna get run out of town on a rail." But I stand by that. It was really good, but it's not my favorite Marvel movie. I think Avengers and Infinity War and Thor Ragnarok were better, but it's still on my Mount Rushmore of Marvel movies at number 4. So yeah, that's dumb. Basically, the Oscars did something dumb, and if that surprises you, you haven't been watching the Oscars for 20 years because they're basically a joke now.
Yep.
Let's see. What else is dumb? Space Force.
You shut your mouth.
Space Force.
Look, it's a glorious idea.
Now we need to have some kind of military branch that is able to do work in space, because cybersecurity and intelligence have a lot to do with satellites. Satellite warfare is going to be a big thing, and I'm not talking about Ronald Reagan pew-pew laser beams from satellites. I'm talking about signals intelligence, communication, things like that are critical to modern warfare depend entirely on satellites. You can't have war without them. So how do you defend them? And how do you take out the ones that belong to the enemy without junking up the sky with shrapnel that destroys George Clooney's space helmet in Gravity or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
How do you have those logistics in space? Because Space Force is not about fighting Marvin the Martian. It's about...
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Ken. Yes, it is.
We're going to fight the planet of Mars to get Matt Damon back. We're going to bomb Mars until they give us back Matt Damon. It really is more about terrestrial warfare and how it is supported from above by space-based assets. And we need a branch of the military that is able to do that. NASA is all about exploration, and I do not want NASA turned into a military operation. I want that to remain as civilian as possible forever. And Buzz Aldrin thinks the Space Force is a great idea. But
because he believes in aliens.
Yeah. Well, Buzz Aldrin's pretty cool. Well, no, but my big but here is making another branch of the military, a 6th branch, would just be a bureaucratic nightmare where we're pissing a whole bunch of money away on logistics and middlemen and stuff when we could just expand the mandate of the Air Force. Maybe that's not as cool as having a Space Force, but I think that would definitely be the better way to go. Right now, what we use the Air Force for, like the U.S. Navy actually has just about as many planes as the Air Force. The 2 largest air forces in the world are the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy, because the Navy has so many friggin' planes on aircraft carriers and at naval bases. But we use the naval planes for fighting day-to-day war for the most part. We use a lot of Air Force planes for rapid deployment logistics. If we need to establish a forward operating base somewhere in, let's say, God forbid, we have to have a ground war, a shooting war with Iran. Somewhere 100 miles outside of Tehran, we could have a forward operating base put down by the Air Force complete with a new landing strip and fences and barbed wire and radars and barracks and places for Army and Marine troops to go in like 20 hours. From nothing, from a patch of sand to a fully functioning military base. And that's a big part of the mandate of the Air Force. And I'm saying that apart from air combat and logistics deployment, we could just expand their role into Space Force! Space Force!
Yeah.
And then someday, we'll have the 5 Lions of Voltron, and then that will just be the Space Force.
Yeah, that's all we need. See, and that's where we need to go with it. We need to start R&D on Voltron.
If Trump comes out tomorrow and makes a speech saying he wants to start construction on the Black Lion, but it's going to cost triple the annual military budget, I'd be like, you know what? Do it. Do it. Take my money. Take my tax money and build the Black Lion. We'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, if they have to take our freedoms away a little bit, and government has to like start putting like grandmas and grandpas to live with people, just like force them. All right, Pop-Pop's got to live with you because to save money on Medicare, because we got to build the Black Lion.
We're gonna have
We're
gonna have a Logan's Run society where when you get to be 60 years old, you just die because we need those resources to make Voltron. Fucking do it. Do it. If I was 59 and a half, I'd still say do it.
Yeah. just let me touch it.
Yeah, I just want to see the concept artwork.
Yeah.
Just let me pet its paw before you put me in the chamber.
Have you slightly related? Have you heard of it's called Kepler syndrome or Kepler? It was something Kepler. It was an astroscientist that predicted that all the crap in the atmosphere, so the satellites and whatnot. It was what gravity was. George Clooney, the movie was based off of. So you have one thing that gets hit, and it starts, and sprays shrapnel and gears and parts and crap everywhere, and that starts a chain reaction, and all the stuff in the atmosphere all of a sudden gets destroyed. And so then we don't have any sort of satellite or any, which would suck, but which is kind of a scary concept.
There was, I forget exactly which book I was reading. I think it was Day by Day Armageddon, it was a really neat book, and it ended up being a trilogy. But the first Day by Day Armageddon was like a found journal of a guy who had lived through the zombie apocalypse.
Oh,
it
cool.
might have been that one, or it might have been Max Brooks's World War Z. I think it was World War Z, where one of the guys, because there was a guy on the International Space Station, and they had to go to the Chinese space station at one point because there was a distress call. So they go over to the Chinese space station, and they find that the Chinese had rigged the whole thing with explosives, and their plan was, in an apocalyptic scenario, to blow those explosives and cause all this shrapnel and junk to cloud the entire orbit, and they called it an orbital denial device or orbital denial vehicle. So you would never be able to put anything in geostationary orbit ever again because there would be this cloud of fast-moving debris moving through all the Lagrange points.
Yeah, that's spooky.
So that's
I don't know.
That's the kind of
Probably,
thing. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that the Space Force needs to be able to defend against.
Yeah.
Is Chinese zombie movie book orbital denial vehicles. Anyway, that's the Space Force, and we're going to eventually have military that works in space. I just hope that we don't waste a bunch of money doing it. We actually do it efficiently, at least by government standards. As long as we had to mention Trump because of the Space Force, we might as well get through our only Trump story of the day. Omarosa from The Apprentice, who was working in the White House at one point, she says she has tapes of Trump using the N-word and saying other nasty stuff about people in a racial way. Coincidentally, she's selling a book that will be coming out in a few weeks. So, to Omarosa and to all the other people who say they have tapes, let me hear the damn tapes. Play the tape or shut up. A secondary point, Why didn't I jump on this train and write a friggin' book? I could have made so much money writing a stupid book.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that window is passed for me. Oh, well.
Unless you have a scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still go the route of scandal, and then...
I could. I need to do something stupid and get caught.
Yeah.
I need to get back on TMZ. Anyway, only a couple of news stories left. Unfortunately, they're crappy stories. One, Hamas is launching rockets into Israel. That's no big surprise. It's what Hamas does. Hamas is a disgusting terrorist organization masquerading as a government because the Palestinian people voted for them because reasons. I don't know why you would do that.
Right.
But they're indiscriminately firing rockets from Gaza into Israel. Many men, women, and children have been indiscriminately injured because we're shooting rockets into civilian centers with no clear targets. It's just like if you hated your neighbor, so you started throwing pipe bombs over the fence at him. You don't know if you're hitting him or if you're hitting him his dog or his kids, or if you're throwing him too far and hitting the next neighbor. You don't know. But if you're Hamas, you don't care either. And and they're shooting these almost undoubtedly from like schools or refugee camps or makeshift hospitals or mosques, so that if Israel retaliates, they will have to look like the bad guy.
Right.
And this is what Hamas does, because they're evil people. They're terrorists, and they will put civilians in line of fire. These places where they're launching the rockets from, they will leave after they have provoked an Israeli response, and these Hamas terrorists are hoping that Palestinians get killed, just so that it will be on the news that Israel is the bad guy.
It's so
they're
ridiculous.
They're like, man, maybe we killed a couple Jews, but you know what would be really awesome if then the Jews came back and accidentally killed some women and kids. And then that would be on NBC Nightly News for a week. Because they're sick people. They're sick, disgusting people. I don't know that we'll ever see peace in Israel and Palestine. I really don't. But Israel, to me, and this will draw a bunch of hate, Israel is always the good guy. You know how I know they're the good guy? Because let's pretend that in your workplace, it's just you and you're a 300-pound bodybuilder and MMA fighter. You're like Brock Lesnar. And then there is this Steve Urkel looking dude. And every day, Steve Urkel punches you in the stomach. Every day, Steve Urkel punches you in the stomach or twists your nipples or something. And if you hit Steve Urkel back, you're the bad guy because you're big and powerful. But you know, and all your friends know, that if you wanted, you could pound Steve Urkel into the ground like a railroad spike. You could catch him at a bar after work or catch him in the parking lot and just mangle him with your giant ham-like fists. But you don't because you want to be a better person than him. That's Israel. Israel could steamroll Palestine, and I hesitate to even use the term Palestine because Palestine's not a country.
Not even a...
It's not a real thing. They could steamroll every single Palestinian person out of Gaza and out of the West Bank tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, they could exterminate every human being in those areas, but they don't. Because they don't want to, because they want to be better than that.
Right.
They'd have some bad PR for a while. They'd get sanctioned by the UN, but in 50 years, they would all be blown over. A blink of an eye in diplomatic long terms. But they don't. They could do it, but they don't. To me, that's all there is to it.
Yeah. Full agreement.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to disagree on Israel very often, that's for sure.
No.
Last story of today, I can't believe there hasn't been more coverage of this. I've seen some, but this is an insane story. So there is an Islamic group in New Mexico that got caught training kids to be school shooters.
What?
5 adults in a compound in New Mexico, and this compound is made of scrap wood and pallets and tarps and a partially buried trailer, and it's got walls around it made of mud bricks that the adults had made with bits of broken bottles sticking out of the top of the bricks, and a secondary wall made of tires filled with dirt to protect against assault. Turned it in their own little paramilitary compound. 5 adults and 11 kids. And the adults were training the kids with rifles, and one of the kids said, these adults were training us with rifles to commit school shootings.
Wow.
So this was a school shooting training camp, but they were also abusing the kids. They were being terrible to the kids. The kids were all like emaciated and starving and dehydrated. The weird thing, well, this is all weird, but one of the weird things to me is this group did not own the land. They were squatting on somebody else's property in New Mexico. And this dude kept reporting them to the police. He's like, hey, these crazy people have built like a wall out on my property out in the desert. And they're just living in there. Come get rid of them. And the cops are like, no, we got better stuff to do. Well, the cops finally went in when it's not clear if it was one of the kids or one of the adults. Somehow got out a message asking for help. And they went in and SWAT raided the place, found a whole bunch of weapons, found these kids living in squalor. All 5 of the adults now have been charged with child abuse and neglect. And unfortunately, they also found one dead child, a 3-year-old buried outside the compound who was the son of one of the 5 abusers. So this guy had kidnapped his own son away from the rest of his family in Georgia, even though the son had really severe medical issues and needed constant medical attention. He took him to this weird desert compound, and of course the kid, because he couldn't get his medical attention out there, he died. And they just buried him outside the compound. And they were teaching these other kids on American soil to be terrorists. So now these kids, I know kids are strong and resilient and whatever, these kids are screwed up for life.
Oh, totally.
There's no being 100% like normal and happy after something like this. It's insane. It's an unbelievable story. And the thing that made me the angriest, apart from it being a human atrocity, is I read this article in USA Today, and where it said one of the children said the adults were training us with rifles to commit school shootings. The USA Today said authorities are, quote, trying to unravel whether this group had sinister plans. Well, gee, I wonder, Sherlock. They were teaching these little kids how to shoot rifles and telling them to go shoot the rifles in school, and they were starving and dehydrating the kids. I wonder if they had anything bad in mind. What a stupid quote. Whoever wrote that, you're an idiot.
Right. What was their motivation for that?
I don't know. It's just insanity. Like, what's USA Today's motivation? I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody who is scared to say, these were evil people. Scared to say these were evil people because they were Islamic and he doesn't want to be viewed as an Islamophobe. Well, guess what? If you teach kids how to do school shootings and you starve and dehydrate them, you're evil, and I don't care. Evil. I don't care what religion you are.
Yeah.
I don't care whether or not it had to do with your ideology. You know, if you've twisted your view of your religion to the point where you think you're supposed to kill people because of it, I don't care. You're just evil.
Yeah. Right. And if you don't have the stones to say that, you probably shouldn't be in journalism. That's my opinion.
I don't get it. I want to read some more of the articles that this journalist has written and see if they ever accuse a politician of being a fascist or something outrageous. I'll give an update next week if I find anything like that. But I think that would be the ultimate hilarious irony.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to call evil for starving children and trying to get them to commit school shootings. We'll see. But that's all the news I got for this week. Sorry for the episode coming out a little late this week. We had a snafu with the editing. We only got a couple episodes left this season. We got 2 more episodes left this season. Then we're going to take a couple weeks off. And we're going to be back with Season 3 in time for the midterm election to heat up. And we're going to take another stab at having video for you guys by the time we get to that. So there's all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff going on that has delayed production a little bit. So we apologize for that. But we'll be on a more regular schedule once we come back. But anyway, unless we got anything else to add, really appreciate everybody who listens. It does mean a lot to me, even if there's not that many. Every single one of those views means something to me. Every comment that you leave, except for the dickish ones, makes me very happy. I love to engage with the community. But until next week, really appreciate you listening. For my good friend Josh Burkett, I am Ken Bone, and I approve this sweater.